35 years ago, Deborah Carr stars in Black Narcissus for Powell and Pressburger.
I can't begin to describe how touched and how happy I am to be presenting this award tonight. An award which I feel very deeply is long, long overdue.
Emeric Pressburger and Michael Powell are honoured this year with the Fellowship of the British Academy of Film and Television, a belated VC for a pair who together wrote, directed and produced a string of the British cinema's most original and durable works.
The court will adjourn.
If you were searching for the two oldish gentlemen who made so many remarkable British films so many years ago and had to wait so long to have their reward, you could do worse than start here at the Savile, a club for gentlemen in Mayfair. In clubland, it's thought to be rather racy, the Savile. Members have been known to appear without ties, have been recorded sporting red socks. In fact, a range of bohemian behaviour is apparently the norm here. It's a pretty British institution. Small wonder then that Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger have been members for years. Or is it? Powell was a man of Kent who, despairing of the British, sought youthful fame and fortune in the film industry in France with an American director, Rex Ingram. Pressburger's an exile from Hungary, a refugee from Hitler's Germany, an escaper to France, an immigrant who found his home in England. Together as the Archers, this curiously assorted pair made some of our finest films in the 40s and 50s, films which seemed at the time bizarrely foreign in their imaginative flair and flavour. Powell and Pressburger don't meet so often as they once did, but when they do, it's likely to be here. Pressburger is more often down at his cottage in deepest Suffolk, immersed in village life, and he's resisting going to New York, where Michael and he are supervising the production of a Broadway version of The Red Shoes. But Michael is happily globetrotting. At 76, he's planning a film in Russia and Cuba about Pavlova, working as a consultant in Francis Coppola's Zoetrope studio in Hollywood, and writing his autobiography.
I got a sort of routine here. I work on my autobiography in the morning, and then about 11 o'clock, I aim at 1,000 words, and about 11 o'clock I walk over to the studio.
Powell lodges in a modest apartment with a view of the Hollywood Hills. It has a token swimming pool, but few other trappings of glamour. The glamour for Powell is that he's living in the heart of the true old Hollywood, before television, before talkies even, and that at the age of 75, he's working in a place with an air of the old days about it.
I like to walk to work because Zoetrope Studios is in the real Hollywood, just off Santa Monica Boulevard. And this is real Hollywood. This is Vine, the famous Vine that ends up in Hollywood and Vine. I stopped the traffic this way. If I did it in New York, they'd run right over me. You can get away with anything in California. This car park is no ordinary car park. It's the car park between Cahuenga and Cole. And before Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was ever heard of, this was the old Metro lot here. And that was where Rex Ingram directed the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which put Metro on the map. And he was my first director. So I always take my hat off to Rex when I come by. And this, believe it or not, this magnificent building was built by Dr. Kalmus of Technicolor, for Technicolor. Wonderful Art Deco building. Those were the days. Glorious Technicolor. This is the Zoetrope Studios. Used to be called the General Service Studios until Francis took it over. Francis knows what a zoetrope is. Do you? This used to be a famous studio. Corder worked here. Eddie Small. Lots of independents. Morning, Colonel. Anything for me? Okay.
I want to be a sailor sailing out to sea. No plow but tinker tailors any fun to be. Aunts and cousins by the Becker's dozens, drive a man to sea or highway robbery. I want to be a bandit, can't you understand it? Sailing to sea is life for me.
This is where Sabu actually finished The Thief of Baghdad in 1940. Right in this studio. I want to be a bandit. Can't you understand it? My God, this is the worst lyric ever written, I think. Francis Coppola loves that. I want to be a bandit. Can't you understand it? Yes.
I want to be a sailor sailing out to sea. No plow boy, tinker, tailors, any fun to be. Aunts and cousins by the Becker's dozens.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said be an actor, my son.
Memories are thick on the ground, but Zoetrope is in touch with the present too, and Powell is in good company working for Coppola.
We met in an East Side restaurant in New York, and I remember he came through the table singing the song from Thief of Baghdad, you know. I want to be a sailor sailing on the sea, you know, Sabu. Because Thief of Baghdad was one of his favorite pictures. And we talked half the night about running an independent studio, which he proposed to do here at Zoetrope. And he said, there's several ways of running an independent studio, and I'm bound to do the wrong way, but why don't you come along and help? I said, what do I come as, a consultant or something? He said, oh no, we'll think up a fine title for you. How about Senior Director in Residence?
The senior director in residence takes a lunchtime stroll with his employer.
I don't know, I've always been a sucker for film studios. You know, when I first came out here and found myself in Zoetrope Studios, it was absolutely wonderful to me. I felt as if I'd come home again.
Well, there's no other place. There's no place where there's so many different kinds of activity going on. You know? There literally once were a bunch of Indians in the phone booth one day, and I knew that I had arrived in a real studio.
Yeah, that's right. Now this, we can go through here.
But it's a real vanishing breed. Now they're all rental studios. You know, it's a big difference if it's a rental studio and if it's really a company.
This always was a rental studio, wasn't it?
It was. But all studios now are rental studios. It's very... Where would you say in the world is there a place where everyone who...
Precious few, yeah.
...who works in the studio is part of one group, one ensemble?
The back of the Las Vegas airport terminal that Coppola built for his new film, One from the Heart. He also built most of the rest of Las Vegas here on the lot. But he's talking to a man who 35 years ago built the Himalayas on the back lot at Pinewood.
There's something about the atmosphere of a studio which is, for me, home. My wife tells me so.
Well, of course, I think in the degree to which we've tried to restore that is just so that I could get a chance to be involved in such a place,
yeah.
You know? Because where else would you go? Every time I've seen a studio in different travels, you know, Ardmore in Ireland, and my first impulse is to want to immediately buy it and bring a lot of people there, you know, and start it going again.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of forces today that work against that.
I'm all for studio-based pictures, anyway. I shouldn't say that to you, I suppose.
Perhaps Powell is thinking of Coppola's grueling experience in the Philippines, where he spent a year recreating the Vietnam War in Apocalypse Now. And perhaps he's thinking back to his own war.
This is Britain, where we believe in freedom.
Powell started work on The Lion Has Wings for Corder on the first day of the war. Corder pawned his insurance policy to pay for it. There was a bucolic patriotism about it that was going to be a mark of much of Powell's work.
For over 800 years we have kept our shores safe from invaders. And for 800 years we have opposed every dictator who arose and tried to enslave Europe. For this is Britain, where we believe in freedom.
You could hardly feel more safe from invaders than in the heartland of the British establishment, Mayfair, the Savile Club. Emeric sheds the country tweeds and Michael hides the Hollywood casuals.
And you feel both happy in the atmosphere of an English gentleman's club?
Well, we feel more happy in having an argument, because we've been arguing together now for about 40 years.
What sort of things do you argue about? What kind of things actually makes you see red or starts you having a go at each other?
Do we have a go at each other?
Not really, no. We trust time. In a few hours' time, he sees that I was right.
Pressburger had worked as a screenwriter for over 10 years before he met Powell, and Powell had made over 20 films by the time he met Pressburger. But when Corder brought them together, something clicked.
My whole work in films would have been quite different if I hadn't met Emeric when I did. We were brought together by Alexander Corder. We were both under contract to him. He brought us together on a film purely as two contract people who could do a job, one to direct it, the other one to rewrite it. Because The Spy in Black was supposed to be a vehicle for Conrad Veidt and Valerie Hobson. And the main part wasn't a good part for Conrad Veidt.
Was heute die Patrouille?
Es war das Licht.
Sind wir allein?
Natürlich.
Wohin führt die Tür?
In die Küche.
Pressburger started by changing the main character's sex and refreshed Powell further by proving that even when the hero was a German spy, you could switch the tension suddenly into comic relief.
Die Treppe?
Zu den Schlafzimmern. You gave me a fright.
Do you think that that was something specifically continental, European, or even Hungarian that you responded to?
No, it was a beautiful mind I responded to. He didn't have to be Hungarian or English or anything. It was the mind.
I have never met a person, and now probably I shall never meet a second one, who guessed, not only understood what I was driving at, but guessed already half of it before I said it, as Michael. I don't think that that happens very often in one's lifetime, but this is how I felt.
The new team were burning to make films to help the war effort. the life and death of Colonel Blimp was a well-meant warning to the old guard that you couldn't fight new wars with old manners. If it was players versus gentlemen, the players were going to win.
Did General Wincandy in the club?
No, sir. The General left an hour ago with Brigadier General Caldecott and Air Vice Marshal Lloyd Hughes.
Did he say where he was going?
Excuse me, sir, but what is your business with the General?
I have a message with him, an urgent message.
You give me the message, I'll see if the General gets it.
Damn it all, man. Are you in the Home Guard?
Why, sir?
The password is Viv Tico 1911.
The General and his staff are in the Turkish bar, sir.
Sergeant Hawkins, you're in charge up here. Stay with him and don't leave your desk around the telephone. You're a prisoner.
The war doesn't start till midnight.
We wanted help from the War Office in the shape of uniforms, trucks, equipment and things like that. And when they read the script, they didn't like it. They said, you're saying that England is losing the war hand over fist because it's run by a lot of out-of-date old blimps, and we don't like it because it's true.
There is a lot in that, and there is a lot also that if you have got all the freedom in the world in such very difficult times as the war, a war, and this one particularly was, if you are let loose and you can do everything, then occasionally you shouldn't wonder that one goes a little bit further.
No.
What's going on here?
Invasions.
But you damned young idiot, war starts at midnight, haven't you been told?
Oh, yes, sir. That's why we're here.
But may I ask on what authority?
On the authority of these guns and these men, sir.
Authority? Authority? How dare you, sir? How dare you? Get out of here, sir, you and your gang of awful militia gangsters. Get out!
Popeye.
Sir.
Guard this man. Stuffy.
Sir.
Go to the cubicles. Find which is General Wincandy's. You'll find a brown pigskin case there. Bring it.
Yes, sir.
But you can't do that. The code is in that case. The whole exercise will be a farce if you have that code.
Oh, no, sir. This is going to be the real thing, sir.
But war starts at midnight.
Oh, yes, you say war starts at midnight. How do you know the enemy says so, too?
But, my dear fellow, that was agreed, wasn't it?
Agreed, my foot. How many agreements have been kept by the enemy since this war started? We agreed to keep to the rules of the game, and they go on kicking us in the pants. When I joined the army, the only agreement I entered into was to defend my country by every means at my disposal, not only by the National Sporting Club rules, but by every means that have existed since Cain slugged Abel.
Stop it.
Don't we know that they're counting on us to keep to the rules?
Stop
that
it.
They openly boast about it? That they laugh
Stop
at us?
it!
Powell and Pressburger were judged not to have kept to the rules. Blimp ran into stiff opposition from Churchill himself. In 1978, P&P were awarded another belated VC for the film that the government had done their best to suppress 35 years before.
Nobody has ever said that, no, you are saying something which is absolutely untrue. They might have said that you are saying something which you should have waited until the war was over and say it then. I myself, I never believed that Mr. Churchill meant that it had criticized something what during the war one shouldn't. He didn't think that it was not necessary. Necessary is not the word for it. But perhaps appropriate is closer to it. It was just saying something which was very touching, really, and hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people have been thinking exactly the same way. Only during the war, perhaps one shouldn't have spoken of it. It is somehow necessary to state it once quite clearly that what are we talking about?
What they were talking about was freedom, and A Canterbury Tale is about preserving that freedom. As a refugee, Emeric knew all about a freedom he feared we took for granted. Michael added to it the feeling that somehow the very idea of Englishness, of Britishness, was synonymous with freedom, and that both were incarnated in the pastoral, in the landscape, a distant church spire, a lowing herd. and that when you were in touch with that, you were in touch with your past, that you too were a Canterbury pilgrim.
Glorious, isn't it?
Is anybody there?
The land girl meets the squire, Culpeper, a strange figure, part wise man, part witch doctor, whose contribution to the war effort includes pouring glue on girls' heads to keep them away from the soldiers.
What sounds did you hear?
Horses' hooves. Voices. And a lute. Or an instrument like a lute. Did you hear anything?
Those sounds come from inside, not outside. They're only when you're concentrating, when you believe strongly in something. Just now I was concentrating on who was coming up the hill to disturb me.
Disturb you at what?
Breathing the air, smelling the earth, and watching the clouds.
You're a man of Kent. And
born east of the Medway.
Right.
Near Canterbury.
And A Canterbury Tale is one of your most interesting films. An almost unique film in the English canon, really, because of its extraordinarily intense feeling for the English landscape and for your place in it, almost, and your ancestors' place in it. Were you conscious of this when you were making the film?
Yes, I think I was. And of course also the man in the film is slightly dotty, which I am too. So once I'd accepted Emeric's premise, you know, that he would go to any length to keep the girls from going with the soldiers, I got a great deal of fun out of it.
I was thinking, sir.
Yes?
What have we got to do with this old road and the people who traveled along it 600 years ago?
Yeah. Isn't the house you were born in the most interesting house in the world for you? Don't you want to know how your father lived? And his father?
That's all right, but how do we know it really happened?
Well, there are more ways than one of getting close to your ancestors. Follow the old road, and as you walk, think of them and of the old England. They climbed Chillingbourne Hill just as you did. They sweated and paused for breath just as you did today. And when you see the bluebells in the spring and the wild thyme and the broom and the heather, you're only seeing what their eyes saw. You ford the same rivers, same birds are singing. When you lie flat on your back and rest, and watch the clouds sailing, as I often do, you're so close to those other pilgrims that you can hear the thrumming of the hoofs of their horses, and the sound of the wheels on the road, and their laughter and talk, and the music of the instruments they carried. And when I turned the bend of the road, where they too saw the towers of Canterbury, I feel I've only to turn my head to see them on the road behind me.
We did discuss it purely as a film, not called A Canterbury Tale, which was to be about the values for which we're all supposed to be fighting.
So they're spiritual values, but they're not specifically religious ones.
No. Spiritual values we know, religious values we can only guess at.
I Know Where I'm Going was about getting close to your ancestors, but in old Scotland rather than old England. A practical young woman from London is bamboozled by the spirit of the Isles and finds truth revealed in a Scotch mist.
Port Eric, 5:15 p.m. A motorboat from Killorn will meet Miss Webster.
Good evening. I'm looking for the house. You'll see a wee gate. Up the brae. Thank you.
I notice it again and I know where I'm going. And a romantic mysticism, a feeling for the landscape and almost the occult.
It isn't really a belief in mysticism, it's a feeling that there is more to it than meets the eye. That's one of the magic things about making a film.
The eye, in other words, is the way into the mystery.
In a matter of life and death, all Powell's and Pressburger's strongest themes come together. The inner eye, which sees beyond the veil of appearance. The war story, which defends the beloved country. The imaginative fantasy, which melts through the dimensions. A crashed pilot on the operating table, suspended between life and death, heaven and earth, as each fights for his mind. The film was chosen for the first royal film performance ever.
Yes, there are two photos there. On the first one, our present queen was Princess Elizabeth, and the king.
George the Sixth.
George the Sixth, yes. And you know that he had a speech difficulty, and I always remember that the king, when he came as far as I was standing, he asked me a question and I didn't understand it. And I was in a terrible mess, you know, because I didn't want him to repeat, because I knew that it is not very simple. And I would have been very, very careful not ever to, but I had no choice. And he mentioned that he remembered The Spy in Black.
Well might the king have mentioned The Spy in Black. The figure of the motorcyclist in goggles and black leather makes an interesting reappearance in a matter of life and death.
There's no crisis in such a thing. Any day will do.
No, it won't. And I'll tell you why I think it won't and why there is a crisis. I'm afraid of his brain being permanently affected.
Insanity?
Yes.
Why?
Because his trial is fixed for tonight and he hasn't found anyone to defend him yet.
Roger Livesey plays the village doctor who fights to save the pilot's life and sanity.
The boy has a fine mind, but it's overtaxed. That's the trouble. It's too good a mind. A weak mind isn't strong enough to hurt itself. Stupidity has saved many a man from going mad.
Yes, you're right there.
And he's had several talks with this heavenly messenger. Hallucinations, of course, but you never saw such an imagination. I've been taking tips on the other world, laws, system, architecture. Here's the interesting point. He never steps outside the limits of his own imagination.
I don't quite get you.
Nothing he invents is entirely fantastic. It's invention, but logical invention.
Livesey plays a role familiar in the P&P canon. He's a bit of a secular priest, a village doctor who's the guardian of its soul as well, rather like Culpeper in A Canterbury Tale, watching over his flock with benign but somehow sly authority, an all-seeing eye which nothing escapes. In the case of Livesey's Dr. Reeves, he even has a mechanical eye, a camera obscura.
There's a hefty young girl. Time Mrs. Tucker went to get our rations. There she is. Oh, the vicar and his sister. Not coming here, I hope. No, good. Quite acute. The butchers must have some offal. Wonderful how the kids love playing in the splash. Just the same in my day. That tree ought to come down. Old Mary looking quite skittish. Sally Allgood getting herself dated up. Ah, here's June. Here she comes. She walks in beauty like the night. Only she's cycling and the sun is out. Nice girl. Worth a hatful of ambassadors in Lee Wood, anyway.
It's the kind of lovely trick. I like to find out how to do it, you know. I used to set people problems like this, you know. How are we going to do this? And of course, everybody had a viewpoint on it. Quite a few departments would be directly concerned.
A Matter of Life and Death was full of opportunities to create striking images which Powell delighted in.
And why am I being taken up this stairway? I'm not being taken for a ride, am I, by any chance? What is suggestion? Oh, take that bit of barley sugar away. I don't like it. I don't like your suggestions. I think I'll go back before it's too late. Peter! 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 Peter, this way for bed! Peter! Peter! Come back! Peter! Peter! Come back!
Stairway to Heaven had to be all worked out in perspective. It shows what a wonderful art director Alfred Junger was, a German art director who'd been in England for, donkey's years. He worked out all the perspective shots, shooting down the stairs, moving, and shooting up the stairs, moving. And we shot them all in one day, I remember. Because we had the camera up high for the start and did all the shots shooting down. There were, and all these images going away in perspective, huge, great statues, you remember. And then we just went down the bottom, and Alfred's men were already taking down the others and putting up the other ones. You see. Everything was different. The use of color and no color. From the makeup. Because it wasn't black and white, you see, it was monochrome. Mm-hmm. And designing for that was so interesting. The scene of heaven, well, I mean, of the other world itself, you know, that was on stage 4 at Denham, which was, I think, one of the biggest stages in Europe at that time. But although it was so big, Alfred managed to fill it and overfill it, so I had to go out the door to shoot it.
Well, you wouldn't find much to shoot there now, at Denham.
No, I wish we could have shot something on the ruins of Denham. It's a sad thing, isn't it? You know, Rank had a great idea. Let's pull down Denham Studios. You know, that's really a monument to the new generation of Rankers. Because Rank himself was a great man.
J. Arthur.
He really was. Yes, he was a great man.
So you don't subscribe to the notion that really it was cinema circuits such as the Rank one which has killed the British film industry?
No, it's... nobody's got any guts. Nobody's a gambler. Nobody can see why they should turn over in their sleep and back films. They own 500 theaters. They've got a distribution organization. They've got one of the best studios in the world, and they let other people make the pictures. That's what's happened to Rank in the last 10, 15 years. And it's very sad. J. Arthur, are you listening? Rattling the money in your pocket like you used to. He was a marvelous man to work with. And he did really think that he would get the Americans, you know, to work with him and sell our pictures all over the world. But after the war, it was a pretty cutthroat business. It didn't work that way.
You know, Nina, we may have to mix something with it.
If the primer critics had detected a distasteful flamboyance in the Archer's war pictures, the post-war melodrama Black Narcissus must have had them reeling in the aisles. This steamy tale of sacred and secular love in a nunnery in the Himalayas was shot entirely in an English studio. Powell and designer Alfred Junger surpassed themselves in the creation of an uncanny atmosphere with the matter-of-fact raw materials of a studio backlot: wind machines, timber, and plaster. A muddy little rock garden under a sullen English sky was magically transformed into a wind-blown mountaintop terrace.
Sister, did you hear the bell? This morning in chapel, I suddenly had the feeling you were not with us. I try hard enough. Try what? I used to forget.
This was the British cinema at a high point of technique and artistry in every department. It seemed inconceivable that we were not going to be able to compete on equal terms in an international market.
join that order.
We've called this programme a pretty British affair after a phrase used by Powell, and that deliberately begs a lot of questions. Corder had married them, as Powell puts it. It was a sort of shotgun wedding, and it turned out to be a wonderful affair for the Archers. Although it seemed at the time that their films were exotically un-English, the blend of their talents, in retrospect, was curiously nothing if not British. Emeric's passionate but restrained love for the British tradition of fair play and freedom is still unshakable today. He, the foreigner, was the one with the stiff upper lip. Michael, the man of Kent, drew on every kind of romantic, mystical bond with the British landscape and people: Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, Celtic twilight superstition, the ecstasies of art, anything, everything to defend the uninvaded land. He was a sort of bohemian in the Home Guard. Even now, Michael thinks of the typically British as something constrained and bloodless. But together, at their best, P&P did define something pretty British in a way that few other film partnerships can claim. It couldn't last.
We'd run out a bit of ideas, and we'd done a couple of films which were based upon real events. The first one was the Battle of the River Plate, which is called The Pursuit of the Graf Spee in America. And that was a success. But it was a pretty British affair, no concessions. And then we did another one based on a real kidnapping of a German general in Crete, ill-met by moonlight. And I couldn't do anything with it. It was, I just couldn't bring anything interesting to it. I didn't like being tied down to the facts.
Yes, I read that you resisted that sort of realism and wanted a bit more imagination in it.
Oh, yes. And so we sort of naturally drifted apart on this idea.
You didn't have a sort of hammer and tongs argument and
No,
Emeric
no.
throwing down the gauntlet for realism and you marching off in a huff about...
No, it was just a rather sad mutual gap. You can't have a mutual gap, can you? A sad gap which opened between two loving people.
Powell's eye took him off in a direction that the gentle spirit of Pressburger would never have followed. Peeping Tom was a fascinating film about seeing, possessing, and killing. It was greeted with horror.
It came out of an introduction to Leo Marx, who wrote the original story and the screenplay. Brilliant conception altogether. I was introduced to him by Danny Angel. He said he's a wonderful code breaker. He'd been a code breaker in the war, Leo Marx. He said, he's got a marvelous mind. He said, you two ought to get together. You're both funny sort of bastards. And you'll probably get on. And so I did meet him. And after a good deal of talk, he suggested this idea. He said, would you like to make a film about a young man who kills people with his camera? I said, yes, I would. That's exactly right.
I'm ready now, Viv. Will you go and stand on your cross, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Director, sir. Am I supposed to imagine someone's going to put me in there?
Yes, Viv.
Oh, Mark, I hope I won't let you down. I know you're trying to create atmosphere for me, but... well, I just don't feel right.
What people couldn't understand, I suppose, was that conventionally the Carl Böhm character is an atrocious, performs these atrocious acts, and yet they were being asked to be finally sympathetic to him, and I think that was, I suppose that was what most audiences thought.
I think so. The film was full of compassion, but it was full of compassion for a diabolical murderer. But then for me, he wasn't a diabolical murderer. He was a cameraman.
Oh, yeah. A less secure man might have been broken by the personal abuse that Peeping Tom attracted. Powell didn't complain, but his career suffered a crippling blow.
The one before was just super. Absolutely, you're never going to get it better. It's like trying to get that ad-lib dialogue with the...
All the sweeter that he should be rehabilitated now by major young filmmakers like Martin Scorsese. He's a welcome visitor on Scorsese's location in New York, where he watches Jerry Lewis and Robert De Niro working on King of Comedy.
It's okay, fellas, no problem. This one's gone. What? Look this way. Okay, yeah. No, kill that. We're going to Bobby over here.
Scorsese's pleasant childhood memories include sessions at the Paramount Theatre, New York, watching the archers' arrows thud into the target on their opening titles.
It's the only thing, when you see the archer, the sign of the archers, you know, it's the only thing that still fulfills, it keeps the promise that it implies. You know, it fulfills its promise. Magic. Not only magic, but but also, as I say, finding new levels, finding other meanings. Not that I'm going to say I'm going to look at one of their films and now I'm going to find new meanings and new levels. No, it happens. It happens with repeated viewings.
The film that most fulfilled the promise of the archers for most people was The Red Shoes, which gave Powell another opportunity to create startling pictorial effects. It was an original screenplay by Pressburger. Scorsese recalls his first vivid memories of seeing the film as a child.
I think.
Yeah, sure. I was hoping Emeric would come with us. I just talked to him on the telephone.
Isn't he coming to me?
Well, he can't come right now. First of all, first thing that happened, typical of Emeric, and Emeric said, I can't come, I'm invited to the Royal Garden Party.
Oh.
And he'd already rented a top hat.
Excuse us.
So I said, well, come the next week, you see. And he said he couldn't do that because he was giving away prizes for the royal wedding at his village fete. So I haven't got Emeric with me at all. Oh, fish.
From early in the war, Powell and Pressburger decided to sign all their pictures together, since both generously felt that the other's contribution was indispensable. Powell, of course, was always the director, and Pressburger always the writer, but their ideas were held in common. They were particularly close in the tale of The Red Shoes, the story of a ballet master, a dancer, and a musician whose dedication to their art is complicated by their personal relations. But while Emeric stays in Suffolk with the fish, Michael bustles down Broadway on his way to check up on the stage production in rehearsal. He seems to be pleased.
I think the changes you've made now have made this musical version, the stage version, much more like the spirit of the original film. And you get these big duets, and is it a trio, would you call it? You've got duets?
We have duets, we have trios, we have several trios,
Yeah.
and we have ensemble numbers involving the entire
Well, I
corps.
think the use of them intensifies the story enormously, as it does in opera, but it ain't opera, it's musical drama. And I think it's becoming something very, very powerful and exciting.
We are pleased to present you with a brief look at a new Broadway-bound musical adapted from the world-famous film, The Red Shoes, written by Emeric Pressburger and Michael Powell, and now adapted for the stage by Robert Weiss and Victoria Wyndham.
Do you think it will be anything like the old Red Shoes that we all remember?
It's an unfair question. I just wouldn't know.
How would you define ballet, Lady Neston?
Well, one might call it the poetry of motion, perhaps, or...
One might, but for me it is a great deal more. For me it is a religion. And one doesn't really care to see one's religion practiced in an atmosphere such as this. I hope you understand.
When in The Red Shoes, Lermontov says one doesn't like to see one's religion practiced in a place such as this. He's talking about dance.
Yeah.
Do you feel that any kind of activity gone into with fervour is as valuable as any other, whether it's religion or art?
Oh, yes, yes. Art is certainly the equal of religion in fervour, in artistic fervour. And of course what made Red Shoes unique was that it was about art and nothing but art, and nothing but art, the best of art would do.
The red shoes force the dancer to go on and on beyond human endurance in a search for perfection. It's the point at which art passes into religion.
This strange relationship between dancing and religion. In many other art forms, religion is expressed very much more simply, paintings especially. But why should it be with dancing? If not that already when dancing became something closely related to religion or expressing religion, already then, in those primitive times, it succeeded in exactly that.
It's doubtful if a remake of any kind could capture the mythic overtones of Pressburger's original. For Pressburger and Powell, the red shoes are the symbol of something more than meets the eye, something they'd striven for in all their work together, the image and the sound that are beyond mere words.
I mean, who really cared? Who really cared? There you had one of the greatest filmmakers in the world. A group. You know, it's not only one person, it's a bunch of people. Himself, Pressburger, whoever you work with, whomever you work with. And after Tales of Hoffman, a few other things, forget it. I don't think many people cared about, even if they did understand that it was like very strange that these almost experimental filmmakers working inside a totally commercial system. And kind of very subversive commercial, you know, method. And I don't think anybody really cared, actually.
When you look back, do you think that somehow or other the British didn't appreciate you both as much as they might have?
When did the British ever appreciate their great men?
Cut.
I hope this will be cut.